Okay, so welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for giving up your time today. Really, the aim of what we're going to talk about today is to help inform people of what life is like as a UX designer. So perhaps to kind of kick things off, you could share a little bit about yourself and your background so that the audience know who's speaking to them.
So my name is Laura Hasting. I currently am a community manager at Red Badger. In terms of my path to now, it's like taken quite a few jumps, but I essentially began as an industrial designer about 10 years ago. And I practiced that for about 3 to 4 years before I got into like graphic and digital design. And then whilst like working on digital design content, the role kind of moved towards a UX role. And then post doing that for a few years, I moved on to a company called General Assembly, which offer workshops in 21st century skills. And my job was to produce a user experience design course. So I did some of the lecturing. I didn't do all of it, but I created a lot of the content. I worked with a lot of clients on kind of bringing clients in to provide UX briefs. And now I actually work for a digital consultancy where I look after the kind of design and UX side of the business. So helping them find UX designers, going out to schools and kind of preaching about UX best practices, and making sure kind of we're always like continually learning ourselves internally, because it's kind of an evolving, it's not an evolving skill set, but it's a skill set that gets bigger and bigger and bigger with the more research and books that are written, conferences that are created. So yeah. That's my career path.
All right, fantastic, thank you. And just in case anyone's wondering, there are people walking by here because I'm actually in the NatWest Accelerator kind of offices, which they provide for free, which is rather helpful. All right, so perhaps, if you could summarize for people who might be listening what a typical day is like for someone who's doing UX design, and then expand into how that might change over the course of a week.
I mean, UX is such a varied skill set, and I mean at the moment I work for a consultancy, so day to day it's going to be very, very different. There is like a rough process every UX designer will follow from kind of beginning to end, but it varies greatly with depending on the work you do. So when I was working in-house as a UX designer, I didn't work on like the full end-to-end of the project. I'd pick bits up as I went. So one day I might be doing research and my boss might have been doing like wireframes and high fidelity mock-ups, which is more his area. And then I might have been doing like spec handovers for engineers. Whereas at a consultancy like the one I'm working at now, like a UX designer, assuming they're sitting end-to-end to a project, would follow a process a lot more rigorously. So you'd start out with your brief and you talk through that with your clients. And then you'd work out kind of what the requirements are for that project. So you'd start with some research and you'd kind of come up with some hypotheses and use your research to kind of validate those hypotheses and those kind of initial assumptions. You then might go on to put together some personas. So this is taking all the research you do into your users and synthesizing that into this kind of archetypal user. You would then move on to kind of idea generation. So these are all really big words, and within them, not big words, big concepts, and within them they have a huge like set of tools that you might use. So for ideation and concept generation, you might do something called Crazy Eights, which is where you come up with 8 ideas in 8 minutes. You might do the managed magic wand technique, which is where you wave a magic wand and you have one really like easy to achieve idea, one really hard idea, and the idea is you come up with the bit in the middle that's like kind of thing like practical but also desirable as an idea. And then you move on to kind of testing, so that'd be like usability testing, so making sure that anyone can use like the product, whether it's digital or otherwise, making sure that like your user journeys work and people don't get lost in the process and then fall out. You might do some kind of user group feedback where you get everyone in a room and talk about goals for using the app, and then ultimately you'd kind of finish off with the high fidelity products. So you'd be working with engineers to come up with a really beautiful finished design. So that's a cyclical process, and you go on and on and on before you actually come up with anything that's near finished. Typical day is varied. It depends where you are and which project you're on.
Yeah, But it sounds as though the variety is actually quite stimulating. I mean, you kind of come across as being quite articulated when when you're describing it all, and quite enthused about it. And I guess with that level of variety comes a requirement to have a range of different skills. You're not doing the same job repeatedly day in, day out. So if you were to try and kind of put out almost in a job description in a way, what would you say the main skills would be that people should consider having, if this was a career path that they were looking at?
So there's a big buzzword at the moment about T-shaped people. So these are people who have UX is so wide, it's like a very almost skill set. So that means you have both hard skills, soft skills. So soft skills could be kind of stakeholder management, it could be public presenting, they could be speaking in a large group of people, mediating sessions. That's kind of where the soft skills sit. So we look for people with like a generalist skill set, but then, and that's kind of the horizontal of the T. And then the vertical is to have a deep skill set, say maybe in research. So maybe you're really, really thorough and you're very good at synthesizing results and then relaying them back to stakeholders. That's a really important skill. Or maybe you're really, really good at ideating very quickly and coming up with bunches of wireframes and knowing exactly what the accessibility requirements are. Maybe that's, but then maybe you're also like more on the kind of product design end where you're doing really high fidelity prototypes and you've got like a graphic design background maybe. So maybe that's one of your kind of vertical skill sets. So I think the thing is not to worry too much about being good at everything, but it's choosing the thing you're good at and then having an interest in everything else. So just like a general mindset to be able to learn. So when we hire here, we wouldn't necessarily, when we're looking for UX designer, we don't actually look for like someone with like a specific skill, but we actually really try to find someone with great soft skills first. Then, the hard skills are very like learnable, and like a lot of them have quite a low barrier to entry in terms of learning them. So it's like someone willing to learn, but someone who has great soft skills to start with, and that's what we'll start off with. And then, great if they've got, animation skills, great if they're a brilliant product designer. So
it's really, I mean, actually, as a psychologist, we would say that that's really good kind of psychology practice, because every single job has transferable skills. There's only 32 different skills for any job, anytime, any place, anywhere, but knowledge is very specific. So, you can learn the rules of a game of tennis very quickly, but actually the skill to be a very good tennis player takes years to build up. So the skills are the harder thing to train and develop, but the knowledge can be acquired quite quickly. So your approach to focus on, I guess, the skill side of it sounds brilliant, actually. And I think a lot of the time when people think of the word UX, I mean, certainly for someone who's uneducated about the kind of the technicalities of this whole new web world, it can be quite intimidating potentially. Would you say that people need to be highly technical to do this sort of a job?
No, not at all. I mean, from my previous role, I had students who went on to graduate and do very well, but yet their background wasn't anything to do with design. It wasn't anything to do with like visual and graphic. It wasn't anything to do with like psychology. A lot of people did come from psychology degrees, which made them great for some elements of it and brilliant at the research. But some of them came with kind of almost like a very like not no expectation, but like almost very ready to absorb everything, and it made them even better just by not having an expectation that they were just going to become better visual designers or better researchers. So no, I'd say no, it's better just to have a real interest in it, and that's the way you'll get
That's amazing. And I think that would be hugely appealing actually to a lot of people who probably haven't considered that this would be a career path for them. You were saying about it being quite a low barrier to entry. I mean, what are the barriers to entry? Are there sort of very specific qualifications that someone might be expected to have before you'd even look at their CV?
No, not at all. I mean, I ended up there. I mean, a lot of my degree was very transferable because I did do industrial design, which had a very similar process. It just had different names. You don't need a degree to do it. You don't need a degree to do design, which was one of the first things they told me on the first day of my design degree.
And I'm sure you said thank you as you were holding your degree in design.
I think the biggest barrier to entry is actually kind of up here. It's actually putting together a portfolio that you're confident and willing to go and interview with. So it can be incredibly simple to put a portfolio together, but to always have that mindset when you're on a project to record everything you do, even if they're scrappy like iPhone shots of some post-it notes, because when you go to interview, you'll be asked to speak through your projects fairly succinctly, and then you can't just speak without having the supporting evidence. It's a kind of show don't tell, but in an interview you do both. So I think the biggest barrier to entry is it's your own barrier, and that's the confidence to show work.
Yes.
A lot of the time this isn't beautiful finished slick screens and prototypes. It's the thought process, which is scrappy, it's Sharpie on bits of A3, and you just need to be prepared and willing to show that to someone.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, it was really helpful advice. Thank you. What about, I guess the financial side of the role? What would you, if someone was coming into it, what might be a realistic starting salary?
I mean, it varies, because I've seen students with loads of experience go into a startup that isn't very well funded. I've seen people with no experience going into like an agency who've offered them loads. There's a huge amount of research to do, and there's loads of resources online to do that. So you can go on Glassdoor, LinkedIn, you can go on angel lists. So if you do want to work for a startup, for example, see when they were funded, see realistically whether their funding would last them a year, and then go in there. So I'd say it can start. It's such a huge I've seen anything for a beginner with 10 weeks of a course kind of experience, anything from like 18 grand at a startup which is paying like minimum wage, up to like 45 grand for someone who's like really owns the job search part of it, and like a bigger kind of agency consultancy style role. The higher end of that is great. The lower end I wouldn't recommend anyone pursuing, because I just think it doesn't show the value of like the design process, and they obviously don't respect kind of your work enough to value you at more than minimum. So I think if you go for a really reputable company, you should be looking to earn anything from about 28 to 34.
Okay, all right, that's really helpful.
Go up after that.
And what about the higher end? I mean, if someone is really experienced and they've been doing it for years and years and years, what might be the kind of the potential that people could expect to get up to?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends. Once again, like when I've seen a lot of seniors recently, they all go contract. It's hugely lucrative, and you can be earning anything from like 450 up to kind of 600-700 a day, which is like crazy money. And that's people who've got like 15 years experience and have been doing it for a long time, which is understandable. You can do that. I think if you go for like a more kind of, if you go for a permanent role somewhere, anything, and it varies hugely. Once again, if you go for a company that maybe isn't as well funded, you could be looking anything from like 50 up until like director level, like chief experience officer, chief design officer, you could be earning 100. I hate to say it varies, but it does.
It does. No, I mean, of course it does. I mean, it does for every single profession. But yeah, I mean, I think to some people, money is clearly a huge driver. So, it's going to be the question people are interested in knowing. So, but I think you've given some really helpful tips as well as to where they can also get more information from. So, and I guess, I mean, one thing that I didn't mention to you right at the beginning was obviously how I came across you. So, I came across you because, with the work that I'm doing with ViewVo, we really want to try and connect people who are thinking about exploring different career paths, who maybe haven't considered something and wanting to move into something completely new. How would you feel about sharing a little bit about the fact that, someone did speak to you and the money, where you asked for the money to go to? Because I think it says something about, Red Badger as an organisation and the charity that you're supporting.
Yes, so the Hala Foundation is a charity that exists to help farmers in Kenya and developing nations knowledge share. So the penetration of smartphones in kind of their economically developed countries is incredibly high, and it kind of creates this digital infrastructure. So you can go to the middle of the Masai Mara and have great phone signal, and that's how a lot of people get their business done still. And so what we did as an organisation was build the first app, which allowed farmers who have like unusable land to share knowledge about kind of historic farming data, and then how to make their land kind of usable again to them. And so what we're currently fundraising to, so we built that up about 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm kind of fundraising to help provide more communities with handsets and data for a couple of years, so they can start having access to the information basically. So that's what we're doing this year.
Yeah, amazing, amazing, and thank you so much for doing it, because I know that giving people a chance to talk to people who maybe they haven't connected through before, and if someone's moving into a new area, they don't have those connections on LinkedIn. So giving your time to her to give her a bit of a better idea of what the role entailed, but at the same time, you know, having that money then go to a charity that you're supporting, it's a really positive and wonderful thing that you did. So thank you very much. Yeah, I haven't got any more questions, so that's it. I will record. I think sometimes shorter videos are better than really huge long ones. So that's amazing. You were so succinct and really articulate. I think it was brilliant. Thank you.
Well, I mean, if anyone wants to follow Red Badger, we do actually do a range of live and pre-recorded webinars in UX accessibility, which is a huge hot topic at the moment. So those of like learning that we provide for the wider world. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's the place that they go to? Is it literally? Would you say out your web address?
Yeah, so it's red-badger.com, and if you go to the events page, you can see everything that's coming up in the office. We do lots of UX events, and we also do online webinars. So if you can't make it to the office, we live stream everything, we record everything, and they can find it.
Yeah, fab. And I'll put a screen up on the site as well to say that. Brilliant. Yeah. Otherwise, thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll be in touch again soon. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Bye.
Bye.